Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kim, how are you doing?
Pretty darn good. How about yourself?
I'm fine. I'm a little sleepy. It seems that since the weather's gotten warmer, it's raccoon mating season.
Nuh-uh. Really?
Yeah. So it's been really loud at night, and my dog is thinking he's going to protect me from the amorous raccoons. So not getting a lot of sleep, but what can you do? And if you've never heard raccoons in love, Google it. It's the scariest thing you've ever heard. It, like,
really?
Literally,
I don't think I've ever heard it.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be Googling horrifying. That later.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. And maybe I'll put them in the show notes for everybody that's listening, but it's horrifying. But anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you want to just start the show off with a little note.
Oh, two little housekeeping things? Yes.
Yes.
First one, we're going to go through this again. It is political season in the United States, so you might be hearing ads that we don't approve of. We try to get no political ads or anything on the show, but sometimes that doesn't work out. Sometimes they slip in. So if you hear anything from any side of the political spectrum, we did not approve it. Let us know. Don't get angry at us. It's not us. It's forbidden. But let us know, and we will take care of it with our host that does this. Second of all, there's some confusion about our trip to the UK. If you guys don't know, Cam and I we're sponsoring a dark history tour in the UK, where we're going to Edinburgh, York, and London. And this is in June, but it's not June of this year. It is in June of 2025. It's like 14 months from now. So there's plenty of time to plan for it, to save for it, and all that kind of good stuff. So I think that's all I have.
Plenty of time?
Plenty of time. So it's not this June. It is next June. And we'd really love for you to come. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you book now, we have 7 extra tickets to give away for free for the Jack the Ripper tour. So
that's right. What she said.
Book it. And if you're having problems booking, if you're overseas and you're having problems, let us know. We'll get you in touch, or we'll have somebody contact you.
Yes.
Easy peasy. All right. Yep. You ready to start?
I'm so ready.
This is a little bit different than what we normally do, so bear with me. They both really made me angry, to be quite honest. This is a little different in a bunch of ways, but it's a kind of a twofer today. And both cases are eerily similar. Sometimes being at the wrong place at the wrong time can have deadly consequences. Sometimes it's not just the place that's the problem. It's the who you're with. And in the 2 cases that follow, neither of these men intended to kill their victims. They didn't set out that morning to take the life of another being, nor did they gain anything from the demise of their victims. But they were responsible for their deaths all the same. People have lived in what is now the area of London, England, for thousands of years, the same London that we're going in 2025 next year. Now, they have the population of almost 9 million people, and it's the largest city in Western Europe. It's a hub for art, education, fashion, and commerce, and it's brimming with activity 24/7. It's a city that has managed to maintain the old along with the new. From one specific vantage point, you can see the historic Big Ben, the Tower of London, and the Canary Wharf. And then there's the modern additions of the London Eye and the Shard. And if anybody's not familiar with the Shard, it's also referred to as the Shard of London Bridge, and it's kind of a pyramid-shaped 72-story skyscraper. And in the middle of the city, there's the River Thames, with 35 bridges that span the Thames in London alone. One of which, the Wandsworth Bridge, would witness an unspeakable tragedy in December of 2015. 24-year-old Charlotte, or Charli, Brown from Essex, England, had been looking for love on Tinder for some time but had had no luck. She wasn't interested in having a good time. She was looking for a long-term relationship. Charlotte had just gotten a promotion at her job and was looking forward to a successful career in the beauty industry. And while things were going well career-wise, Tinder hadn't produced Mr. Right. So she decided to try a new dating app. She tried OkCupid. She began talking to a 30-year-old web designer named Jack Shepard. Unbeknownst to Charlotte, Jack was a serial womanizer. This guy had web pages where he would give advice on how to pull women, how to get women. Mm-hmm. And he even made his own dating site. Jack had asked Charlotte out on a date, and since Charlotte liked what she saw in Jack's profile, she agreed. He was handsome, and he seemed to have his life together, So of course she's going to accept the date. However, on the night they were supposed to meet up, right before they were supposed to meet up, Jack sent her a message and said that, you know what, he was going to get back with his ex. He's getting back together with his ex, and he's going to have to cancel the date. And like anybody, Charlotte was upset. She was very upset about this, and so she blocked him on OkCupid. But a few months later, Jack found Charlotte on Facebook.
Ugh.
And he reached out to her and he apologized again. And then he told her, you know what, things hadn't worked out between him and his ex, and he really was deeply sorry that he canceled on this, the first date with her. And as an apology, he wanted to take her out to dinner at a nice, expensive restaurant in the Shard overlooking London. And Charlotte, who always tried to see the best in people, agreed to go on a date. On the 8th of December, 2015, a Tuesday night, mind you, Jack took Charlotte to a restaurant on the 32nd floor of the Shard and wined and dined her to the tune of 150 pounds.
Oh.
No, it's very expensive. They were getting bottles of wine and champagne, and he was just...
So he was
going all out, right? Everything was going well, and the two really hit it off. Charlotte periodically sent photos to her sister. She sent her pictures of Jack, the restaurant, of herself, of the city, the River Thames, constantly in touch with her sister. And as far as Charlotte's sister could tell, it was a fantastic night, and Charlotte was having a wonderful time. Afterwards, Jack and Charlotte headed back to his boathouse in Hammersmith to continue the night and to share a bottle of champagne. On the way to Hammersmith in a taxi, Charlotte again was in constant contact with her sister. After consuming more alcohol at the boathouse, both of them felt pretty comfortable and relaxed, as one does with being
And
drinking,
she likes them,
right?
and she feels like she knows them, right?
Yep. It was then that Jack suggested taking a ride on the Thames in his speedboat.
Oh.
Charlotte thought the idea sounded impossibly romantic, and of course she agreed to it right away. However, her sister wasn't very keen on the idea and worried about Charlotte's safety.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But Charlotte replied with, "Oh, it'll be fine." And honestly, it would be her first time in a speedboat, so I'm sure she was excited. But what Charlotte didn't know was that Jack's red speedboat was ancient and in dire need of repair. It had a pronounced pull to the right, and the pilot would have to fight to keep it straight in the river. Captain Jack, as he liked to call himself, ushered Charlotte onto the boat at about 10 o'clock p.m. on that frigid winter's night. It's challenging to make out the twists and turns of the river at that hour, and the dark water seems to merge with the night sky, making it even harder to navigate. And even though life jackets were safely tucked in the storage compartment in the boat, neither Jack or Charlotte put them on. Safety 101, always wear
Plus,
your
they were drinking,
life
too,
jackets.
right?
Charlotte continued to take pictures and videos to send to her sister. And at one point, Charlotte can be heard on a video yelling above the motor, "You're going too fast."
Oh.
And moments later, as they were headed towards the House of Parliament, the boat hit a tree submerged in the water, and it overturned and flung Charlotte and Jack into the freezing water. Witnesses said that they could hear a bang and then silence. A moment passed, and another witness, whose balcony overlooked the Wandsworth Bridge, heard a man screaming into the night, "Help me, help me." Quote, "My attention was taken away from the boat when I heard screaming. I had a feeling it was a young man. I could see some people on the bank and lights where people were shouting, 'Tell us where you are, we can't see you.' But he just kept hearing, 'Help me,' from the man."
He just kept hearing a man's voice scream for help.
But the witness kept saying he heard the man screaming, "Help me, help me." There was a couple walking past when the accident happened, and they said that they could barely see what was in the water because it was so dark. But eventually they could make out two figures holding onto something in the water, and then they heard their panic cries for help. So they called 999 right away. As the figures drifted closer to Plantation Wharf, the boat briefly went under. And when it came back up, only one person was still hanging on. When rescue arrived at around 11:45, they found Jack hanging on to the side of the boat. Charlotte, along with all of her belongings, was nowhere to be seen. Rescue workers weren't even aware that she was supposed to be there until witnesses at the scene told them two passengers were on the boat. However, one helmsman claims that Jack did mention Charlotte, and he actually wanted to help find her. The air support service came and shone a bright light as they flew across the water looking for Charlotte. And once they found her, rescue pulled Charlotte's unconscious body out of the water and a little while later began CPR. And while she was technically still alive at that point, everyone agreed that it didn't look good for her. At the hospital, she was pronounced dead from hypothermia. Her belongings, including her cell phone, would later be recovered from the Thames. It would take almost a year before police could retrieve texts and video from Charlotte's phone. In the meantime, the police took Jack in for questioning. In the interview, Jack is obviously shaken up and emotional. He admitted that both of them had had a lot to drink that night, and he also admitted that neither one of them were wearing life jackets. However, his memory became fuzzy when it came to the actual accident. He thought that Charlotte had asked if she could drive the boat, and wanting to make a good impression, he said yes.
What?
He stated that he didn't crash the boat. Charlotte did. She was the one driving. But I also want to tell you that he also told an officer at the bridge that the woman he was with was named Olivia, not Charlotte.
Was he too drunk, or did he just have confusion, or do we not know?
Olivia is the name of the girl that he had the date with the next night.
Oh, okay.
Then when he was corrected, he just said he was confused. After this, it came to light that this was sort of Jack's routine. He'd take his dates out to an expensive dinner, imbibe them with a lot of alcohol, and then invite them out for a ride on the Thames late at night.
Oh.
He did this a lot. When the police asked him if he would drive a car after consuming that much alcohol, Jack said, "Oh, no, of course not."
Oh.
So the police wanted to know why he would drive a boat while that intoxicated. And Jack answered, quote, "Because there's no law against driving a boat drunk."
There is, isn't there?
Not that I could find. I mean, it's not.
Here there is.
Shouldn't. Oh, here, big time. Yeah.
Okay.
But over there, it's suggested that you don't, and you could face problems if you do, if you get caught, but it's not necessarily against the law.
Okay.
The following morning, Charlotte wasn't at work and her sister couldn't get in touch with her. And they, of course, were worried. But at 10:45 a.m., two uniformed officers informed Charlotte's mother, Roz Wickens, that her daughter had died in a nautical accident. And her mother was like, "Nautical accident? What do you mean by that?" Charlotte's family was understandably upset and wanted to know what happened that night. So DC, John Baldwin, was determined to get answers. He started reviewing the fateful night's CCTV footage, and Baldwin saw how fast the boat was zigzagging in the water and couldn't believe that it was Charlotte driving. So Jack Shepard was brought in for another interview 2 months after the accident. Jack gave a statement that he didn't remember anything about the accident except that Charlotte was driving and that he did attempt to dive under the boat to find Charlotte. Remember, right after the accident, Jack wasn't for sure what happened. But now, 2 months later, he was absolutely certain it was all Charlotte's fault. She was driving. And that's because he knew he was in trouble this time. He knew that he was liable for what was happening. And then on, from every question that he was asked, Jack answered no comment. So with no evidence of any wrongdoing, Jack was let go. And right after this interview, just 2 months after the boat crash that killed Charlotte Brown, Jack married his ex-girlfriend. And they had a baby. And they moved to Wales. And his wife didn't know anything about this accident at all.
He never divulged that he was involved in that?
Nope.
Wow.
Yep, he left town as quick as possible. He packed up everything and left. Police worked on gathering evidence for a year. They couldn't find anyone who had witnessed the crash. However, they found witnesses, including a woman whose apartment looked out on the Thames. And however, they did find other witnesses, including a woman whose apartment looked out on the Thames. And she said that she saw Jack and that he was looking over the side of the boat. She also says she never saw Charlotte, but she couldn't be sure because of how dark and far away it was. And honestly, Charlotte's family, her parents, think that Jack staged the crash because something happened to her beforehand, like she might have fallen out of the boat. Because the Thames is pretty choppy. And so if you go really, really fast, with you can almost get airborne, you know? And then if the steering wheel has that pull, like she could have lost her balance and fell out.
Like she never was even in the boat, maybe, when it crashed.
Correct. Or that he purposefully crashed the boat to say, this is what, it's all speculation. It's all speculation on their part.
Yeah.
Police also discovered that Jack had been stopped by the Marine Policing Unit multiple times for speeding on the Thames. And on one occasion, there was a woman sitting on the very front end of the boat without a life jacket. So it's been a year, and the police finally managed to receive the data from Charlotte's phone. It had to dry out, and it took a year to dry out. And the last video she took proved that she was not the one driving on the boat at the time of the crash. Jack was at the wheel of his speedboat. And this is the video in which you can go online and find it. It says, oh, you're going so fast, right? On September 20th, 2017, Jack Shepard was charged with manslaughter by gross neglect. He pleaded not guilty, and he was released on bail. While out on bail, he got into a fight at the White Hart Hotel. He and his friend were looking for some alcohol to drink. They'd been drinking all night. I guess they ran out, wanted to get some more. So they went into the hotel, and as they were walking in, they were told by a man named Dave that they wouldn't be served, that they needed to leave. Dave, there's a documentary that I saw on this, and Dave is quite attractive, by the way.
Oh.
But he could tell that they were already drunk, right?
They didn't need any more alcohol.
Exactly. And that, you know, the place was nice and quiet, and they didn't need any big to-do going on, right?
Yeah.
Jack didn't like this, and so as he was walking towards the door to leave, he smashed Dave in the head with a bottle of vodka that he had put in his back pocket.
What?
Now, Dave just finally recovered from being shot in the head in Afghanistan 4 years prior. Like, he had a bullet go through. Yeah, right?
Wow.
So then a local man wrestled Jack to the ground. You know, another patron at the bar, I guess, wrestled him to the ground, and he held Jack there while the police were called. While Jack was being retained, he said, quote, "It's our word against theirs." And he, meaning Dave, hit himself in the head with the bottle. He's like, you can't pin this on us. You can't, it's your word against ours, blah, 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 blah. And that's when the man that was restraining James said, well, you know what? I'm an off-duty police officer.
Oh, wow.
Jack was, of course, arrested and brought in. And during the questioning for that incident, he repeatedly answered every question with no comment. And he was heard telling his friend that he wasn't worried about the incident because, quote, nothing they could do about it, and it was their word against his. He's 30. It's not like he's 22 years old. He's 30. You know, but of course, Jack didn't know there was CCTV footage of the assault, and you can't deny that, right? But Jack was let go, and he was let out on bail, and then he just left. Like, he totally left the town he was in. Just left. Well, police tried to find him. They called his mom and his wife. His mom didn't know where he was, and he hadn't been in contact with his wife for a while.
So he left his wife, too, and child.
Just
he
gone.
Seems like a prince is what.
There's pictures of him, and he's got this smug grin.
Of course he does.
Trust me. This is. In July of 2018, 2 years after Charlotte's death, Jack was a no-show at his own trial. This is the trial for the manslaughter trial. He's going to trial for manslaughter, and he doesn't show up. His legal team only contacted him online and claimed to not know where he was. Now, mind you, Jack had £100,000 in legal aid that the public is paid for, but Jack couldn't be bothered to show up for his trial. And somehow, which blows my mind, his legal team convinced the judge not to let the jury know that he was on the run.
Unbelievable.
The cojones on this kid. At the trial, a witness testified that she had been on a date with Jack the summer before Charlotte died. She said he'd also taken her out to that romantic boat ride along the Thames, and she was terrified the whole time she was there. She said the boat desperately needed repair, and Jack drove way too fast. And on that date, the police had stopped and cautioned Jack that he and his date should be wearing life jackets. The jury allowed to view Jack's boat, and one officer described it as a death trap. Other witnesses at the trial included people that were walking along the Thames at the time of the incident in December of 2015, and they said the one thing they noticed was Jack was always screaming, "Help me," not "help us."
Oh.
And the lack of concern for Charlotte's well-being was obvious. In his absence, the judge said that Jack Shepherd had a duty to keep whoever was on his boat safe. They sentenced him to 6 years in prison.
Good.
Later, he was given another 4 years for the assault of what happened in the pub in 2018, and they were to be served together. Only when the police went to arrest him...
Let me guess, he's gone.
Jack Shepherd was nowhere to be found. He'd fled the country.
Wow.
He fled to the Eastern European country of Georgia, where he was in a new romantic relationship. She was a former TV journalist who had no idea about his past. Jack lived in Georgia for 10 months under the alias Jack Grant and worked as a web developer like he did in London. He traveled. He learned how to ski.
He's living his best life. Yeah.
Not knowing where Jack was, the police set out to try to find him. They tracked his passports and flights, and they were able to track him to Turkey before his trail went cold. Couldn't find him. They looked into his UK bank accounts. They hadn't been touched. And anyone who knew where Jack was, they weren't talking, even with a $25,000 reward. Finally, somebody was able to track Jack from Turkey and crossing the border into Georgia. And soon the British media descended to where Jack was hiding in plain sight.
He's something else.
So eventually, Jack's girlfriend persuaded him to give himself up. And Jack contacted this glamorous, high-powered lawyer. And I'm going to screw up her name, and I apologize, but her name is Mariam Kablashvili. She's model,
gorgeous,
raven hair, pretty. She goes, "I'm very popular." Like in the documentary I watched, "I'm very popular." Like she was on George's version of Dancing with the Stars.
Oh.
And she won.
Oh. Okay. So, yeah, I guess she is a little popular.
Of course, Jack contacted her. Jack told her he wanted to prove his innocence in Charlotte's death. "Little too late, buddy. You already had your trial in England." But Miriam took him on. She said she believed him. And she said he had honest eyes.
She must have been looking at somebody else's eyes. They weren't his.
In late January of 2019, prosecutors in the UK requested that Jack Shepherd be extradited back so he could serve out his sentence. And Jack was scared to go back to face the music, so he was going to try to fight it. His model-esque lawyer told the BBC, quote, "What happened in the River Thames is not a crime by Georgian law. If their behavior is not in Georgian law crime, the person must not be extradited."
So I'm guessing he researched this before he chose that place to go to. Am I correct?
Something. I mean, they did have this trial, and he had to stay, I want to say 9 weeks in a Georgian prison. But finally, on April 10th, 2019, Jack Shepherd, who was now 31, was extradited to England in handcuffs. And on the flight back, he was on the flight with like tons of reporters. So he was getting a barrage of questions. But he was telling reporters on the flight back how he ran out of fear and he regretted not staying. And he told reporters, of course, with that smug look on his face, how he didn't believe his actions solely caused Charlotte's death and that Charlotte herself was partially to blame. Victim blaming.
What? I mean, just you did it. Just say you did it.
You did it. It was an accident.
Unbelievable.
But now, 3 years after Charlotte's death, Jack Shepherd began his 6-year sentence. And in January of 2024, after serving only half of his sentence, Jack was released and he's now a free man.
Wait, how long did he serve?
3 years.
Wow.
Charlotte's father, Graham Brown, is angry that Jack is out of prison, and he criticizes the justice system for giving Jack such a lenient sentence. And he's quoted as saying, quote, "Jack Shepherd should not be released until he tells us the truth. The only one who knows what really happened is Jack. And in my mind, he murdered my daughter and should be doing a proper life sentence. We want to know what happened. But evil men like this, who do these sorts of things, never admit or tell anyone. He will never admit it. I know he won't. He will say it's not his fault. In my mind, he murdered my daughter and should be doing a proper life sentence." But yes, to this day, he still says Charlotte was the one that was driving the boat. It was all Charlotte's fault.
And that's right. He will never admit guilt. No way, because that's not his personality.
And he's probably on the dating scene now.
Well,
I mean, it was picked up by all the media. His face was plastered everywhere. So
people forget, though, like a year or two goes by, and if he's not going to be honest with somebody and tell him that, they may not know.
They might not. They might find out later.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
But it made me so, this documentary, I used a VPN. It's on itv.com. I was so mad every time I saw his face. Like
she had a punchable face.
Oh, so punchable. Mm-hmm. So punchable. And he's just cocky and arrogant and all those other adjectives to describe cocky and arrogant. I hated him. I'm going to say that. And I mean, I feel the family's anger. I feel Charlotte's family's anger for them.
And, let's be honest, accidents do happen.
They do.
But then when you fess up and you take responsibility for what happened, that makes it easier for the family to...
Mm-hmm. And then we'll go into that too on the next one.
Exception, right? Mm-hmm. Or accept it. But then when you have some smug, punchable face guy that's just, you know what I mean?
That blames the victim on for their own death. Yes.
Make it even worse.
Yes. Yes. Cam and I are back singing the praises of the fascinating hidden object game Seeker's Notes. I mean, I have been hooked on this game since I've downloaded it, just like the millions of other mystery lovers that play it. The captivating visuals and atmosphere make me lose myself in this post-Victorian world that the game is set in. I mean, the other day, I was so immersed in the game that my kids had to remind me to go fix dinner.
That's funny because, you really do kind of get lost in it. It's amazing.
And I kept thinking, you know what? They can fix their own dinner.
You're busy.
I'm busy, yeah.
You're busy. Seeker's Notes goes way beyond being just a hidden object game. There's also Match 3, logic, and memory games to engage you with brain-teasing puzzles. You can train your brain by playing because every game gives your brain a workout.
It does.
Playing these games can really help improve your concentration, your attention span, and of course, it can help hone your power of observation. And that's something all of us armchair detectives need.
I really need the help with the attention span, believe me, I do. But you know what? Best of all, it's free to download. Oh, and there's no annoying ads that constantly pop up. I mean, isn't it so aggravating when you get pulled away from your game to have to wait for some loud ad for another game to complete?
Yes.
Absolutely hate it. And best of all, you don't need Wi-Fi to play, so you can play it anywhere, which makes it the best game for you to play with parent pickup lines, waiting in the waiting room at the doctor's office. I mean, endless.
Just have a couple minutes, pop on, pop off. It's great. Now, whenever you need a break from your day, you need to try Seeker's Notes. Keep your mind sharp. Download Seeker's Notes now for free.
So our next case, believe it or not, is similar, if you can believe that, speedboat killing. But this one was requested by Jen K on behalf of her mother.
Aww.
And then once we go through it, I'll explain why it was requested.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. Sounds good.
31 years ago, on August 30th, 1993, the body of a young woman was found floating in the Chesapeake Bay, just 250 yards from the Cove Point Lighthouse in Cove Point, Maryland. The Chesapeake Bay is a boater's paradise and is the largest estuary in the United States. It supports over 173 shellfish species and produces millions of pounds of seafood annually. The bay lies within the state's low-lying coastal plain and is an essential ecosystem for many reasons. And it's not surprising that many people are drawn to it, especially in the summer months, because there's a lot of fun and you can frolic, all that stuff that goes along with the boating life. Now, crimes in the bay fall under the jurisdiction of the Maryland Natural Resource Police. And at first, they thought the body that had been pulled from the water was most likely a suicide or perhaps a boating accident. But then the more they thought about it, the more they felt that if it had been an accident, why hadn't someone reported it?
Mm-hmm.
Within hours, the investigators received a call from the Lundenburg School stating that a student of theirs, 33-year-old Nancy Lynn Manni, was missing. Investigators were able to positively identify the body by comparing its fingerprints to those on Nancy's Coast Guard card. Nancy Manni was a hardworking steward from Detroit, Michigan. She was outgoing, friendly, and a student at the local Harry Lundenburg School of Seamanship. Now, the school trained seafarers to upgrade to higher jobs and gain the necessary skills to become marketable in maritime trades. Nancy had spent the past 10 years at sea working on cruise ships and cargo vessels, and her goal was to stay close to the sea and travel the world. She was studying to become a chief cook, the senior-most unlicensed crew member working in the steward's department for merchant ships. She had high hopes. She loved the sea. Upon examining her body, the coroner found that Nancy had lacerations on the back of her legs and buttocks, which were most likely made from a propeller. He felt that Nancy had been alive and trying to swim away when she was run over by a boat.
Oh,
he actually thought that she could have been trying to dive deeper into the water when the boat ran her over because it was only, on the lower.
She was trying to,
Right. In his opinion, she had been run over at least 3 times, and she had most likely been murdered. Some were quick to point out that in the pitch dark with a loud boat engine, it's possible she could have been run over accidentally by more than one boat, but the coroner felt sure that it was murder. And accidental or not, he did list the cause of death as drowning. Bodies will drift out 100 feet for every 10 feet of water depth.
Oh.
Right? Mm-hmm. So that's where they had to kind of place where the incident happened. Investigators believe that Nancy had been killed within a half mile from where her remains were found. I mean, really, there's not much they can go up because the body's in the water. Like, there's no prints, there's nothing. It's all been washed away. And the last time that anybody ever saw Nancy was in her dorm room at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and she had been getting ready for the day. The school log showed that Nancy had left the parking lot at 10:32 a.m. on Saturday, August 28th, and her car had never been returned back to the lot, which I learned that it takes about 2 days for a body to surface in the water. An APB was issued for her car, and if the police weren't confident of foul play at first, they soon became convinced. When they went to Nancy's dorm room to look for clues, the room had been ransacked and things were missing.
Oh.
And upon speaking to school officials, the MNRP, which stands for, I already said it once, Maryland Natural Resource Police. I will try to say MNRP from now on. The MNRP was handed a photograph of Nancy's ex-boyfriend, Billy Mesmer, and was told that Mesmer should be on the top of their list as a suspect. Top suspect here. Mesmer had had previous encounters with the law involving narcotics, but, nothing major. Billy Mesmer was described by those who knew him as an intense individual. And when Nancy broke up with him, he was devastated and even threatened her with violence. Like, I think a friend of Nancy's claimed that he threatened to kill her if she didn't get back together with him. Because that works, right?
Unbelievable.
When investigators informed Billy of Nancy's death, he was extremely upset, and he was formally questioned 2 days later. Police had found poetry that Billy had written for Nancy, and the content made the investigators suspicious.
Oh.
Some of the more disturbing lines included, quote, excited breath escapes his lips while he waits without the light. No one will ever hear your screams as the predator begins to bite.
Ugh.
The title of the poem is called Night Stalker. It's vampire fiction. Considering vampire fiction was kind of all the rage in the early 90s, it's quite possible that Billy just fancied himself an up-and-coming writer. But the police did their due diligence all the same and demanding to know where Billy was the day of the murder. A few hours of his day were unaccounted for, but eventually he produced an alibi. Billy continued to be on the police radar because he started his own investigation into Nancy's death. That's, a big hint, right? That's what people like to do. They throw themselves into the case.
Mm-hmm.
But police felt that Billy was obsessed with her and had been unable to deal with their breakup. However, Billy's side of the story is that Nancy was the love of his life, and there was no way he would harm her. And unsurprisingly, Billy suggested that the person that they really should be investigating was Nancy's most recent ex-boyfriend, Tony Sacco. Before police had a chance to interview Sacco, Nancy's vehicle had been located at the Tiki Bar on Solomon's Island. And now at the time in the early 90s, the area was known as the center of a party scene. There was quite a bit of illegal drug activities going on, and the Tiki Bar was a fun little hotspot of the area. It featured live music and outdoor dining, and it had a view of the marina and the bay beyond the marina. The MNRP soon found witnesses who remembered seeing Nancy there on Saturday. She had spent the afternoon talking and chatting with some of the regulars, but then towards the evening, as the sun was setting, Nancy had kind of paired off with this unknown man. Eventually, the man offered to give Nancy a ride on his boat, and Nancy, who loved the ocean, of course, agreed to go. And the two were last seen walking down the pier together. And the police, wondered, could this man be Tony Sacco? At the time, Tony was a representative of the Seafarers International Union at Lundenburg School. In the 1990s, Tony had a temper, and he liked to drink, and he was described as being a big man. And police determined that some of the items removed from Nancy's dorm room were photos of Tony Sacco himself. It became apparent to the police that this whole case was coming down to a lover's triangle. Billy wanted Nancy, but Nancy wanted Tony. But Tony and Nancy couldn't get along, so they broke up, and Nancy still had feelings for Tony. Police firmly believed that it was one of these two men that killed Nancy, but which one? Tony left the state right after Nancy's body was discovered, but police were able to track him down and learned that he had an alibi for the day Nancy was murdered. In the meantime, MNRP received an anonymous letter suggesting that they investigate the union officials concerning Nancy's murder. The letter claimed that the union was running a vast drug smuggling operation, and they felt that Nancy could have witnessed something that she wasn't supposed to. It was big, international drug smuggling rumors that were going on. Even Nancy's family felt that the school or the union was involved simply because her dorm room had been ransacked before the police or the family had a chance to go through it. Right?
That's weird.
Very suspicious, right? The police also discovered that the photo the school officials had given them of Billy Mesmer had come from Nancy's belongings in her room. So how did the school get that photo?
Yeah, how did they?
I don't know. It became apparent to the police that the school officials had gone through Nancy's dorm room and tried to scrub it clean of any trace of Tony Sacco before reporting her missing. But why? Was it just to save the Sacco family, the school, and the union the negative publicity? Or was it because Tony was involved in Nancy's death in some way?
I don't know.
The MNRP contacted the FBI for information on the Seafarers Union, and while they received a thick file full of information, nothing ever came of this line of investigation. There's no evidence whatsoever to link the school, the union, Tony, or Billy to Nancy's death. So investigators were back to square one. The MNRP came under intense scrutiny because nobody on the police force at the time had ever investigated a murder. We're talking, the lead investigator had been on the force for 20 years.
Oh.
And this was his first murder to investigate.
Really?
They primarily investigate boating incidents and they do search and rescue missions.
Yeah.
That's it. So eventually, they requested help from the Maryland State Police. And the Maryland State Police said that MNRP had thoroughly investigated Nancy's death and that there was no more leads to follow. And while that might have helped the MNRP feel vindicated, it didn't solve the mystery of what happened to Nancy Manni. So let's fast forward a few years to February of 1996 when the MNRP decided to broadcast Nancy's case with one of our favorite popular television shows, Unsolved Mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
It was their hope that since Cove Point was a popular destination for tourists, that maybe somebody had witnessed something the night Nancy was murdered. And they thought it was possible that a tourist, who had seen Nancy that evening might not be aware that there was a crime committed and Nancy was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happened.
Nobody called in? No
Until
leads?
a year after that first episode aired. The police received a phone call from a woman. Well, actually, a lawyer representing the woman, but the woman's name was Debbie Watts. Debbie told them that her brother had called her for a disturbing confession. Debbie said that her brother was crying and needed to get something off his chest. And he told her, quote, "I killed that girl up in Maryland, the one that was on the TV show." Can you imagine getting that phone call?
No. And then she sat on it, or did
no,
she?
No, this was she immediately called police.
Okay, that's what I was checking.
But it took a year for, I guess, him to watch the show. Or maybe a year played the guilt.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was wondering.
Right.
Like how long? Yeah.
Her brother's name was John David O'Meara. He was not a member of the Union. He had no affiliation to the Lundenburg School. And he sure wasn't Billy Mesmer or Tony Sacco.
Ooh.
So what was he to Nancy? A complete stranger who met her at the bar and asked to take her out on a boat ride.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess nobody saw her leave with him?
They did, but nobody knew who he was because he's not from the area. He was a tourist, I guess.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A stranger.
Oh, that's scary.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you remember all the crazy stuff we did as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
As 30, 20. Yeah.
Let's go with kid.
Yeah. The police flew down to Florida to interview John O'Meara. And different stories give different reasons as to why O'Meara was in jail already. One said that it was for violating a restraining order and from his wife. And the other said it was for larceny. But either way, John O'Meara was already in jail when the state police and the MNRP were sent to speak with him. But in cases like this, you need a confession. At first, John O'Meara said that he'd never been to the tiki bar, he never met Nancy, and he hadn't been on a boat since 1992. However, police were able to show him that they knew exactly that he had been on a boat after 1992 because of an improper mooring violation that he received at the tiki bar in 1993. The tiki bar is the bar that Nancy was last seen at. And if anybody needs to know, if mooring, it's actually to moor a boat, is it to attach it to a pier or a shore or a anchor? That's what mooring or moor means, M-O-O-R. John O'Meara was one of 6 kids, and he was one of those individuals who, for whatever reason, could never quite get his life together. He had gotten involved with drugs early on in his life, and he had just never been able to stay on the straight and narrow. He told investigators that on the night of the 28th, 1993, that he and Nancy had been drinking at the bar for quite some time when she agreed to take a ride in his boat. They continued to have a good time, and they started to add marijuana to the alcohol and that they had been consuming all night, right? John claimed that Nancy was dancing around on the boat, having a good time, and when he hit a disturbance in the water, possibly one of the many crab pots in the bay, Nancy stumbled out of the boat and into the water. He said he drove the boat around this area several times but couldn't find her, so he left.
Really?
Yeah, he left. And he didn't report the accident because his trouble with the law.
How could you live with yourself? Seriously.
Thank you. However, the police decided to use one tactic that most people don't realize that the police have at their disposal. And do you know what that is?
I don't.
They lied to him.
Oh, good. Yay.
Police are allowed to lie to get information during interrogations.
Mm-hmm.
Usually. I'll reference that. Usually they are allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
police told O'Meara that they could match the propeller blades from his boat to the one on Nancy's legs, which isn't true. It's like telling us when we were kids that the gum, they could match the gum to our teeth marks and that they could prove that we're chewing gum in school. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah. I was told that by, I forgot which teacher, but somebody told me that. Of course I did. I was scared to death. But anyway, it wasn't true. The lie, though, did make John change his story. He said that he had driven repeatedly over the area, quote, over and over and over, and thought he had driven over a crab pot. And he claimed that he didn't run over Nancy deliberately. John O'Meara was arrested for first-degree murder. The lead detective thought that the fact that John had gone over the area with his boat 3 times and that the coroner said that Nancy had been driven over at least 3 times meant that he had for sure killed Nancy. John had for sure killed Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Still, they knew that to get a jury to believe that he was guilty of first-degree murder unanimously, it was going to be difficult because it was an impossible thing to prove.
Mm-hmm.
Worried that they quite possibly could lose a first-degree murder case against John, the decision was made to offer him a plea deal for second-degree murder, which, of course, John accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And after serving 15 years of his sentence, John was released from prison. Now, once John O'Meara got out of prison, he spent the rest of his years active in his church and advocating for victims of human trafficking. When he died on March 5th, 2019, his obituary stated that in lieu of flowers, memorial donations could be made to True Justice International, which is an organization that helps fight human trafficking. Many people believe that the death of Nancy Manning was nothing more than an accident and that John O'Meara, thinking that he would likely be found guilty of first-degree murder and go to prison for life, took the plea deal for second degree even though it was an accident. There are also those who hold on to the belief that Nancy Manning was a victim of a giant conspiracy. A few years before Nancy died, another woman by the name of Elizabeth Greenberg was found floating in the bay. This was in 1988. And Elizabeth, bore a striking resemblance to Nancy. And the circumstances around her death are very similar. Elizabeth Greenberg's death has never been solved, and for some, it's too much of a coincidence to ignore.
Well, maybe just like that first guy, this is what he did. He went to bars and drank and picked up people and...
Accidentally. There was an accident and fled the scene.
Yep.
The MNRP, on the other hand, believes that John O'Meara had tried to sexually assault Nancy on board of his boat that night in 1993. And while she was trying to fight him off, she either went overboard on accident or John tossed her overboard out of anger.
Oh.
And once she was in the water, being under the influence of drugs and alcohol, O'Meara panicked and then deliberately ran over Nancy, causing her death. Nancy Manny's family followed her wishes and had her cremated and scattered her ashes in Honolulu, Hawaii. While neither Jack Shepherd or John O'Meara started out on those fateful days with the intent to find a victim and murder them, their behavior after the incidents were nothing less than reprehensible. Instead of doing the honorable thing, or even just voluntarily paying the consequences for their reckless behavior, they chose the path of obfuscation, deceit, and total disregard for the victims' families who were left reeling from their losses.
Again, accidents happen, but you gotta pay the price for your... It was horrible. The incidents that happened were horrible. Them leaving makes them look... Well, it's unthinkable. You know?
There's no respect for those guys.
No.
At all.
None. Nope.
You know what I mean? It makes them, to me, since they ran and they were cowardly, to me it makes them every bit as much as a murderer as any of the other people that we've discussed on this show.
Oh, I agree. And they did. They ran.
They left.
Like I said, that makes it the difference between an accident and murder.
Right. And what really sucks, we'll never know what truly happened that night. Like Charlotte's family are left, they know Jack was driving, but Jack being an ass blames it, victim blames. I mean, how low can you be to blame the victim?
Pretty low.
Seriously.
Then they're not even here to stand up for themselves.
Right. And at least John, he admitted that he thought it was something else that he hit, right? It might not happen the way he said, but he, I don't know, admitted to driving the boat. But anyway, we'll go into Nancy Manni's case was brought to us, like I said before, from Jen. Her mother requested we do this case because her mother was actually the woman John was married to, the one who he went against the restraining order.
I did not know that. I just got goosebumps.
Yes. And although she never knew Nancy or that even that John had killed her.
Wow.
John just said that there's something within her mother who is at the end of her life. Her mother feels that she owes Nancy a voice.
Wow. That gave me goosebumps.
So she wanted Nancy's story told. I'm going to cry. It's very sweet. But yeah, that's why we did the story.
Yeah.
Of Nancy Manni. God love her.
Like I said, accidents happen, but when you purposely leave the scene of an accident, I mean, you don't know that they could have still been alive. If you know what I'm saying? You don't know. Wow.
Well, and with Jack Shepherd, the fact that when he was wanting help, he only asked for himself. He never said, help us, help us. It was help me, help me. As far as I know, no one ever heard Charlotte's voice. They only heard Jack.
That's very telling since he's pretty selfish, we can see. That makes sense to me. And meaning, like, even if she was there, he's so self-centered as to how he reacted after the fact.
Right.
I would not be surprised that he would just say, help me, like, not anybody else.
Right. And if, like I said, I saw the video. It's called Speedboat Killer. They show video of the Thames at night, and it is completely black.
Oh, yeah.
Like how anybody was ever able to see anything is beyond me. So who knows? She could have fallen out beforehand. That's
what I'm saying. And she could have been alive, but you're not going to last long in water.
Especially in December when it's freezing cold. Just stay out of boats with people that really don't.
I'm just thinking, you drink and you make dumb decisions, but you really don't think anything would end like that.
No.
You think that you're going to meet some guy or a girl or a person and, you're either going to have a good time and it'll be a good memory or you won't. But you don't think it's going to go that way.
We have Nancy, who loved the ocean, who loved seas, loves boats, right? That was her life. Of course she's going to want to go out on a boat. She'd been drinking. She probably met this really charismatic man. You're going to go on a boat with this man? Then Charlotte had the date of a lifetime. The man dropped money on her like crazy. Not that that's important, but still, right? He fawned over her. Like there's a CCTV of them leaving where he gives her a kiss as they're walking out. She's getting her coat. She's enchanted by them from what it sounds like. And get on a boat. She'd never been on a speedboat before. How exciting, right?
Yeah.
You're like in the moment.
Yep.
And look what happened. I don't know. Stay away from strangers, kids. Makes me worry about my kids now, even more so.
Again, you don't think anything like that's going to happen.
No, never. And look at all the dumb stuff we did. I remember getting into a car with a man when I was 18, and this guy was a man, and we were in Florida, and I left the hotel with you guys. You guys were back at the hotel. I left with this man to go get us beer.
No, it's terrible.
It's terrible. And the fact that I did it is one thing, but the fact that you guys let me do it is a total another situation.
That's crazy.
Right?
It's crazy.
It is. The guardian angels really worked overtime with us.
They did. They really did. They really did.
Unfortunately, Nancy and Charlotte were not lucky.
Yeah.
And
that's what I mean. I think when you're younger, you just think I don't know. That's never going to happen. Yeah. Just doesn't.
And
good job. That was something, let me tell you.
Just be careful out there, people. And my heart goes out to Nancy's family and Charlotte's family. I can't imagine. I mean, only 3 years. I'm telling you, the Jack Shepherd, I can't.
That's nothing. 3 years?
No. He was on the run for that many, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I was thinking here in the States, even if it was an accident, it could be manslaughter, right? And so he would most likely get more than 3 years.
Yeah.
Oof.
I don't know.
Unbelievable.
I don't know. It's unreal. I think that's it. I think that's all. Once again, we're going to do a pitch for our trip. You can find it on our webpage at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. You can find out all the information. You can contact us Our True Crime Podcast at Gmail. If you want to talk to us, you can DM me on Twitter or Insta, and I can walk you through booking, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to have a great time.
Yes,
we really
are.
think you should go. You know, and you don't even have to go with a person, a friend, or anything.
We have singles going. I mean, you know, individuals, like not in a group. There we go.
Yeah, and we're your friends. That's all you need to know.
Oh, yeah.
We're your friends.
We automatically have that one thing in common, which is podcast and murder mysteries and stuff like that. So,
and heck, they don't even have to listen to the podcast. I mean,
well,
if you want to bring a friend, and they don't listen to the podcast, that's fine. But trust me, we've got quite a few people booked already. So
yes, we do.
Insta friends. That's all you need.
Right. Yay! Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's it.
Jen, until next time, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.